So now we can come back to our main content. Inside of our surface, we can invoke the input field that we just spent time putting together. So here I can say input field as such, and voila, we have all of these arguments that we need to pass, and they need to be filled. Okay, so the first one is going to be state. The state here is going to be what? The first one is going to be the value state. Remember, we need to really know, at all times, we need to know exactly what is going on inside as users type something inside of our text field. So for that, because we're inside here, we need to create a state, right? So I'm going to say val, call this total, let's call this total bill state, okay? And I'm going to say is equal to remember mutable state of, and it's going to be 0 because it's just going to be an integer. So we can then use that total bill state inside here. It has to be a mutable state. That is the deal. Okay? So I'm going to pass here total bill state as such. Here's a problem. It looks like, so if you hover over, it looks like we have a problem. It says here type mismatch, requireable mutable state string and found mutable state int. This was my bad because I assumed that we need a string here, right? But everything or anything that is passed inside of a text field of any form, it will always come out as a string. That's the reason why this should be a string, which means I can just put empty strings like that. And if you remember correctly, inside of our input field, that's what we said. The value state is a mutable state of type strings. Makes sense. All right, now we need to go to our label ID. What is that we want it to say? We just want to say something that says enter bill. So essentially, label ID is going to be added here like that. Enabled, we're just going to say true, right? To make sure that this is enabled. Now we may say, I don't remember what that is. Let's go back to our components. So enabled here, if you go back to our outline text field, if you have over enabled, it's going to tell us exactly what that means. What is it that we're enabling? Well, we're enabling here, if it's true, that means, well, enabled, we're controlling, enabled, says here, controls the enabled state of the outline text field. So when false, the text field will be neither editable nor focusable. The input of the text field will not be selectable. Okay, so that's what we're doing. We want it to be all those things. That's why we're going to pass true, as we see here. A single line, we want this to be also true. Just want this to always be a single line. All right. And next, we're going to pass next on action here, we're going to pass a few things. So first of all, I'm going to say keyboard actions because we need to retain or give access to the keyboard actions, because the idea is that when the input field is clicked, the keyboard will pop up and we need to we need to set up the structure of our keyboard in a sense, what we want to happen. So I'm going to say keyboard actions. And let's use a lambda in this case, okay, and passing the keyboard action scope inside here. Now, these actions here will depend on a lot of things. First of all, we want to make sure that whatever is entered here is valid, or there is something at all. How do we do that? Well, again, we're talking about state, because to check if something is there, we need to check if something is there. This something is a state, which we've said here. That's what's controlling total bill and so forth. So what we need to do, we need to create another state variable here that will allow us to check whether this state, whatever is inside here or not, is valid or not. So the state in the sense of our text field. So in this case, we want to look inside and see, okay, if there's 100, is this. So in this case, we want to check to see if there is something inside here. If that's the case, then that will dictate what is it that we're going to do in our keyboard actions. So that means then I need to create another state here. variable. I'm going to say val, just call it valid state, okay? And I'm going to say remember again, a lot of remembering. So the other thing we can do with our remember here is that we can pass the values that we want to operate on, right, as parameters. So what is it that we want to operate on? Well, it's going to be our total bill state, that value, because that is what we want to look into to see if there's something in there. Remember, this total bill state is actually connected to the value state, which indeed is what will be added inside of our bill here, our text field. So now here, what are we going to do? We're going to check. So I'm going to say, first of all, I'm just going to pass, say, total bill state, that value. I'm going to go ahead and invoke the toString. Actually, I can just go straight to trimming, trim, and then check is not empty. Oh, a lot of things happen here. So what are we doing here is saying we are creating a valid state of what? Of this text field. And how do we do that? Well, we can use remember because we want to make it a state, right? And we pass the value that we want to check. In this case, it's going to be this total bill state value, which is indeed whatever they are adding here. So if it's 100 or 2 or hello world, right? So what are we doing here? We're checking if total bill state that value, whatever is entered here, if it's 100, we're going to trim anything around 100 because it's a text. So we're going to just get rid of all the excessive spaces and so forth. And check if it's not empty. So this returns what? Yes, a boolean, which means true or false. So if it's not empty, that means this valid state is going to be false because it's not. So if it's not empty, this is going to be true. Valid state is going to have true. So that means then something is not right. So if it's not empty, that means all is good because this will return true and will be passed inside, will be passed to our valid state. Okay. And that will mean that it's valid, which means we can continue whatever we need to do. Does that make sense? So now, here, let me go ahead and just say code for now. So now we can do what? Well, we can check. So what I can do now, I'm going to say if is not valid state. Okay, if it's false, so it's not valid, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to say return, but I'm going to return at keyboard action. What that means is that just return whatever this keyboard is going to allow us to do. So just return that. And then here, I'm going to put a to do. We'll get there. Once all of that is done, we need a way of dismissing the keyboard, because at this point that means we've entered something, all is good, and we'll still have to do something there, right, to get that information, in this case whatever they've entered, and do something with it, but we'll get there. So what we need to do, we're assuming at this point the word showing, so we want to hide it automatically. So to do so, we'll have to do something else. First of all, at the top here, we're going to create yet another val called keyboard controller. So hit enter, and this is going to be a local software keyboard controller like this, and say that get current as such. Say it's equal like this. And the moment you do that, you will see that we have a little problem. It says this API is experimental and is likely to change in the future. Now, this is the reality about Compose at this point, at the time of the recording of this video, this lecture, is that there is a lot that is being done. There are a lot of APIs that we can use them, such as this one, but is experimental, which means they're still working on it. And it can change in the future. So please be aware of this. And I know that as you go through this, at some point in the future, things may not work, or this API may be gone. And it's frustrating, but it's part of being a developer, and there's really not much we can do. But just keep an open mind, and whenever things change, we can readjust, right? So keep this in mind as we go through this course. All right, so how to fix this for now, because it's usable, we can use it, it's just that it's warning us that this is experimental and we need to make sure that we understand this. So to fix this, I'm going to add this annotation here, like this, and you can see that it was added experimental compose UI to be able to use this local software keyboard control current. Okay, so this is what will allow us to do something like this. To say keyboard controller.hide. Okay, now this is probably nullable, so I'm just going to say option, alt option, like this. I'm going to either surround with null check, or add non-null asserted, or add the safe, like this, the exclamation point. Okay, there we go. Okay, let's open the split view here. Let's go ahead and refresh and see if we can see something inside of our main content. And voila, we can see we now have this very nice text field there, and it says enter bill, and voila. Okay, let's go ahead and run this on our emulator, deploy that. If you click on this deploy preview, it's just going to go ahead and deploy this preview here. Let's look at my device. This is old. All right, looks like we have something that's failed. Let's see here, this expression will be, let's just go ahead and rebuild first. I think that's going to solve all the problems. Okay, let's go ahead and do it again. Deploy to device. All right, so let's go ahead and test this out. I'm going to call this main content. Instead of top header, I'm just going to remove that and call this main content as such. Right, because again, we have that experimental compose UI thing. We have to add, so whatever you call something that already has the UI, the experimental UI, you need to add that. In fact, let me add that at the top here. I think that would be better. All right, let's see if this works now. I'm going to run onto the device or emulator, depends on what you're using. All right, after a few moments, you can see there you have it. It's working on device. I can tap and there we go. I can add a number and hit that and it goes away. So it's working, right? I can go back and tap there. So it validates everything. If I try to tap like this, nothing happens because we are not, we don't have any value there. So let's go again, and there we go. So it is working, and that's always good news. So we're making real good progress. In the next video, we're going to refactor this even further, so we were able to get this information that we're adding here, because that's very important. That's a state that we need to get and do something with that value. Okay, we'll do that next.